we're getting into that time a year again, not just the wind, where things kind of warm up a little bit, and I'm a baby when it comes to cold weather, okay? I'm the one who, the instant that it's like anywhere near like 40 degrees, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go out biking, it's cold. Well, so now we're not really having that problem too much anymore. Things are warming up, I'm biking more, it's great out there, except for the wind, so that's, I guess, you have to pick your poison. Do you want to bike in the wind, or do you want to bike in the cold, or do you want to bike in the intense heat? I think Roswell is a place that doesn't cater to people who are babies on the bike. And I guess I have that against Roswell. But when you're exercising and you're spending a lot of time exercising, you start getting these knots everywhere. And I notice the older I get, the more you get these knots. And so it's like you're in a little bit of a pickle, because when you work out, you don't feel good. But then when you don't work out, you don't feel good. I don't know, I don't know what to do. I'm like, you look at those. There's these late night, what are they called? Infomercial things. You know what they're called. And they have where you basically sit there and do nothing, and it's an exercise. Like there was the one back in I guess it was the 90s maybe, where you'd strap it around your waist, and it would what? And it would jiggle. It would jiggle, and supposedly this was gonna take away all your weight problems. I don't know. My aunt bought into it. And she's like, yeah, I can really tell it's working. I was like, I can't. I'm not trying to make fun of you, Aunt, but I just can't tell. I don't. But she swore by it, something to do with making you sweat or jiggle, or I don't know, it did something. And it was this late night, so you saw these people sitting on their couches, and they're all smiling, having a good time, looking happy. And I'm just thinking, I don't know, I've never been sitting on my couch and never looked that happy. But back to my main point here, when you start exercising, you start getting these knots everywhere. And you're at a little bit of a pickle, because the knots don't feel good, and you have to work out the knots, which doesn't feel good. But exercise is good for you. Well, the same thing is true with churches. Churches that are doing God's purposes, they're going to get knots too. You know what I mean? And those knots, unfortunately, have to be worked out. They're not something they can just be like, Now, specifically, we're looking in the book of Philippians, which was a church that was really not getting along. They really didn't have that much love for each other. So they're at this place where the cat's away, and so the mice are kind of playing. And so they're kind of not getting along. There's this big tiff. It's getting worse and worse. And Paul can't really do much about it because he's in prison. So it's not like he can just hop on a boat and go on down there or something, So he's kind of stuck. And so he's trying to appeal to them to get them to work things out. And so that's where we're continuing on in the book of Philippians. But wherever there are people, there's going to be hurt feelings, there's going to be conflicts, but God has called us to work it out. He's called us as those who are united with Christ to work it out. Proverbs says it like this: where there is no ox, the manger is clean. It's not in there making a mess. But there's a lot of work that is done through the strength of an ox. So it's one of those things where if you don't want people to ever upset you, to ever, throw you off your groove, you got to not be around people. But it's with the power of people coming together that we can do the work that God has set for us to do. So if you'll please join us, we're going to read Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 to 13. Please stand for the reading of the word. Here's what it says. Therefore, a little trigger happy, I guess. Therefore, my dear friends, just as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is working in you both to will and to work according to his good purpose. Sorry about that. There's a little bit of a typo there. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for our time together as a church. I pray that you would be with us. You would bless your church. Give us ears to hear whatever you'd have us to hear today. And guide and bless my mouth that I would say what you would have me to say. And Lord, may I be made less and you be made more. We love you, God. Amen. You may be seated. So it doesn't seem like we read that much, and we really didn't. It was like 2 verses. But there's a lot of stuff happening in these two verses. And remember, I've said repeatedly about how whenever there's a verse that is well known, people do this kind of thing where they just kind of ignore what's going on in the rest of the passage. And they just kind of take that one verse and they'll memorize it and quote it and all kinds of stuff, but they have no concept of what it actually really means in its context. When I first got here, I taught this Bible class. I don't know if any of you remember, but I said in the class that you can literally get the Bible to say anything. If you don't pay attention to the context that the verses are in, you can make the Bible say anything you want it to say. I mean, look at it like this. Some people actually use the Bible to justify slavery. So, I mean, clearly you can see that you can literally twist it to say anything you want it to say. The way of not falling into that pit is by paying attention to it in its context. So let's go through this little section by section. We'll go back to verse 12, and I'm just going to take out sections of it so we can focus on those sections, and then we'll read it all together at the very end, okay? Therefore, just as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence. So you don't just obey when he's there, but also when he's gone. Going back to the whole when the cat's away, the mice will play. When he was there, he was growing the church, everything was fine, but now he's gone, and there's conflicts coming up, and they're not really resolving those conflicts. They're just kind of just living with them. And, you know, Paul is trying not to come across as a taskmaster, and he's not their taskmaster. He's not. But it's basically like when you have kids, right? You ask them to do something, like do the dishes. Why? The dreaded why that every parent hates hearing those words. Why? Because I said so. But see, that's exactly my point. You can go down to the line of because I said so, or because you'll get spankings, or because you're a part of this family. We are a team. We work together. You got to chip in, right? You just know that I'm going to make your food later on, right? We're going to eat dinner together, right? So yeah, you're going to use the dishes, right? So yeah. I'm not going to eat all the food that I'm making, and you're not going to use all the dishes you're washing. So, hey, do we see a teamwork, anybody? You know, and eventually, you know, kids get the idea. And I hear a lot of one thing that has really come from the feminist movement that I really appreciate is they've been sure to let us men know how we're failing in every way, which is I appreciate. But I say that as a joke. But one thing specifically is so evidently. Men aren't supposed to wait until our wives ask us to do something. We're just supposed to look and then do it? What? What? I don't agree to that, okay? Because here's the thing. You want something done, you can use your words, right? I mean, if I want something done, I can use my words, right? It's like the whole thing with the toilet seat about whether or not you put it up or you put it down. How about this? If I want it up, I'll put it up, and if you want it down, you'll put it down, and everybody's responsible for themselves. But evidently, that's controversial. Who knew? I remember I told it to one person. Oh, she got very upset. No, you put the toilet seat down. I'm like, okay, all right, sorry. But here's my thinking. My thinking is everybody should put the toilet seat and the toilet lid down. You might say, that's kind of persnickety. Why put down the toilet lid? Because, my dear friends, when you're in the bathroom and you've got your phone or whatever and you drop it, isn't it nice to have some kind of a barrier where it doesn't fall into the toilet? Right? Doesn't that make sense? So if everybody would just put the toilet lid down, everybody would be happy because, you know, then you got to do just as much work anyways. And I'm getting off topic here. My point being here, Paul's not a taskmaster. There's two ways that you can do stuff. You can spank or you can show the teamwork stuff. And that's exactly what Paul's doing here. He's not trying to lord it over them. He's not trying to say, look, you guys are really irritating me. You need to knock it off. Look how he addresses them. Therefore, this is the very beginning of the verse, my dear friends. My dear friends. He's not saying, listen, you peons, get your act together. He doesn't talk to them like that. He talks to them like he's not a taskmaster. And the thing is here, remember, last week we were looking at that section was talking about Jesus. All about Jesus. And in that section, one of the takeaways from that is that Jesus freely obeyed as a servant. Freely obeyed as a servant. He didn't have a taskmaster for himself. He did it. He obeyed to the point of death. So then, his point in saying that is, hey, yeah, you must obey as a servant. Even with Paul gone, you guys got to figure this out. And so then, obviously, the person in a conflict is going to likely say something like this, but I didn't start it. Well, Jesus didn't start it either, but he still died on the cross, so I think we can, take one from the rule or from the playbook. So then he goes on to this next section. And he says, work out your own salvation. What in the world does that mean? Have you guys ever stopped and thought about this? What does it mean to work out your own salvation? What does that mean? When I was younger, I kind of got some different ideas going through, but I want to get right out of the get-go and clarify. Paul is not trying to coerce people to do what he would have them to do. You understand? He's not trying to bludgeon them and manipulate them into following Paul's convictions. Instead, what he's saying is submit to Jesus' example. See, what did we go through from verses 5 through 11 last week? Did we go through all the things where Paul was an example? No, we went through all the things where Christ was an example. Paul's not trying to coerce them into doing what he wants them to do and follow his convictions. He's trying to get them to follow Christ's example. This isn't like, hey, I don't think Dungeons and Dragons is bad. You think Dungeons and Dragons is bad. This is not something like that. This is something like this. Y'all aren't getting along. This is really important. The church needs to get along. It's a really, really important thing. And everyone, I think everyone everywhere really eventually has, well, Christians specifically, have to reach a point in their life and in their walk when they answer the question, because who told you so? Because someone told you so, or because of Jesus? Why do you do the thing that you do? Because Jesus' example shows you that? Or do you do the things you do because a pastor told you to, or a church expected it of you, or some priest somewhere said something, or a tradition said it, or you grew up in a certain tradition, or you're whatever, and so you do those things because of that? Or do you do it because of Jesus' example? See, people will always let you down, okay? It doesn't matter who we're talking about, they messed up. Mother Teresa, she messed up. The popes, they all messed up. Everybody's messed up. Peter, Paul, go down the list. Everybody's messed up, except for Jesus. So the thing is, you might have some things that are good that you do and some things you don't do that aren't real good, but the main idea still remains. It ultimately doesn't matter if you follow every tradition of man to the letter, if you're not following the example of Christ. Everything that we do is weighed against the scale of Christ, not against the scale of what some other person wants of you. So what does it mean that he says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling? Well, when I was younger, I kind of got this idea, and maybe some of you can relate, that what he's saying is, hey, you, I want you to second-guess your salvation. I want you to live in constant paranoia of, are you really saved? Are you? Late at night when you're supposed to be sleeping and being at peace and being at rest, instead of that, I want you to have panic attacks thinking maybe you aren't really saved. Maybe if you die during the night, you're going to hell. I want you to always be afraid and have an existential crisis. But here's the thing. This doesn't really make sense, does it? I know a lot of us grew up thinking that that's what it's saying here, but just stop and think about it. In the last section we looked at last week and the week before that and a little bit in the week before that, he basically said the exact same thing. Stop considering yourself so much. Be humble. You're thinking about yourself. Treat others with exemption, not yourself. He said basically the same thing all through the end of chapter 1, into chapter 2, and all throughout the bit talking about Jesus, was basically stop paying so much attention about yourself. So now we're saying that Paul, after saying don't pay attention to yourself, now he's saying go and pay more attention to yourself. What? Does that really follow? Does that really make sense? Well, I don't really think it does. So let's kind of work this out. First off, when he says work out your own salvation, that is very misleading in English. Very misleading in English. If I want to talk about all of you, I'm going to say you in English. If I want to talk about one of you in English, I'm going to say you. Greek doesn't work that way. So this is more in line with what's being said. Work out y'all's own salvation with fear and trembling. Okay, all y'all work out your own salvation, y'all's salvation, right? So if that helps you, then great. Paul is not saying lock yourself away in some closet somewhere and weigh your heart. He never tells us to do that. He never tells us to do that. Rather, he is saying collectively, as a church, work out your salvation. Okay, so what does that mean to work out your salvation? We still haven't gotten that answer. Well, to work out your salvation basically means show what you have received in these conflicts. You're in a conflict, so why don't you show what you've received in those conflicts? So we could ask we could reword what he's saying into a question instead, if that helps you. Does your salvation change anything? Does your salvation change how you deal with problems? Does it change how you work? Does it change anything? Does your salvation have any effect on your life? Sometimes we like to say, oh, I'm saved, but do you know Jesus? Is that salvation doing anything for you? To work out your salvation basically means work your salvation out to its conclusion. Instead of receiving the truth, which is good, it's good to receive the truth, right? We all agree with that. But instead of receiving something and keeping it locked away, receive that and then filter it out, act it out. Maybe you could even say it like this. Let what God put in you come out of you. Okay, you've been saved, you're in this conflict, so work out your salvation. Don't keep it inside, work it out. Work out your salvation. Y'all are not getting along. Y'all need to start working together by working out your salvation. So what God has put in, let it come out. So we could say the conclusion of all of this is something like this. Y'all's salvation is the church community being reconciled. Not just to God, which is the starting point, but to man, which is the maturing of your faith. To be reconciled with God is an easy thing. You're a sinner, right? Lord, forgive me. Done. That's easy. Super easy. Barely an inconvenience. But then when your faith starts maturing, it's not supposed to stay locked away as a personal devotion between you and the Father. It's supposed to extend out to others. That's how faith matures and develops. So this is why in James, he talks about the way that letting your faith mature is going to have to involve enduring the conflicts. It's easy to run away from things, especially when you get your feelings hurt. It's a lot harder to write it out, to stay past the problem. Oh, that's so hard. That's so hard. Everybody, all the pastors I know, they love being in a church for the first year or two. Some churches really baby you, and it can last up to 6 years. Most churches don't last that long because this is the honeymoon period. You go there and everybody loves you. They're just so happy to have a pastor. They're all excited. Well, that goes away pretty fast. You know what I mean? So I actually know a lot of pastors who what they do is they go from church to church. They go until the new wears off, and then they go somewhere else. I can see the enticement behind it. And obviously, it's not only pastors who do this kind of stuff. We all do this. It's easy to follow where things feel good, right? How many of you have a family member that you can't stand and they can't stand you? Anytime you're around them, it's living hell. You want to go there for Christmas and stay there for about 2 or 3 weeks? Well, probably not, right? Well, that's kind of exactly the same thing. So then what is their motivation for doing this? And you might say, well, didn't we just look at that whole passage about Jesus? Yes, that's true. But let's kind of tie these two ideas in. See, he says, therefore. Now, I heard it when I was first going to Bible class. I heard a pastor say, or I guess it was a professor say, therefore, my dear friends, whenever you see therefore, look what it's there for. And I think that absolutely applies. 90% of the time, you're going to be able to figure this out in English, but there is some times when it just doesn't really come across because some things are just lost in translation. But still, a lot of times you can. So this is one of those examples where you really can. Therefore, my dear friends, just as you've always obeyed. Okay, what's the therefore? Because of 3 things that he said in the last section we looked at last week. Oh, I guess I don't have them listed on the thing. Sorry. The first thing, because Christ humbly obeyed to the point of death. So then, obey. The second thing, because every mouth will confess that he is Lord before the end. So then, start now and obey now. Therefore, the third one, because he, Jesus, is our only salvation. So then, if Jesus is the only way to be saved, let these things change your conflict that you're having. Let it change something. One thing, when we look at Jesus, I'm astounded by the things that we don't see with Jesus. We don't see Jesus, we don't see Jesus trying to irritate people just to win his argument. Not that we would ever do that. But one thing that we see is we don't see Jesus having conflicts, especially with his disciples. And you might say, hold on, Jesus had all kinds of conflicts. No, he really didn't. When I say conflicts, I'm talking about you don't get along with people. You know what I mean? Like, you get along with that one person that everybody gets along with that person. But that doesn't count. Like, when there's somebody who's a really easy person to get along with, you can't say, I get along with people because I got along with that person. It's like, come on. Think about the most hard to get along with person. That person. Okay? And Jesus wasn't just getting his feelings hurt every Friday saying, no. Jesus was not involved with conflicts, especially not with his disciples, the people who he was with all the time. Jesus had opposition. Yes. Conflicts, no. And there's a big difference. With opposition, look at how he dealt with opposition. Yeah, he stood his ground. He didn't compromise on his morals. Yeah, he did what was right. He didn't brush things under the rug when it was a big deal. Okay, all right. You don't see Jesus not reporting child abuse, for instance. Like, that's not what I'm talking about when I'm saying, when I'm saying that he did this. Rather, you see him having love, and you see him having control. Love and control. It says this, he loved his own until the end. That means he loved Judas until the point that he died. That's what that means. Okay? But then beyond that, we also see self-control in Jesus. So everybody's accusing him of things. He's about to be crucified. Everybody's accusing him of things. And, Pilate says some things, and these people say some things, and the Jews say some things. And everybody just seems to be kind of, spitting literally and metaphorically on Jesus. And through all of this, you don't see him sitting there trying to win his point. You don't see him trying to win the argument, trying to make himself look good. You don't see him doing any of that. Rather, it says that he quieted himself. Complete control. He did not lose control of himself. And we live in a culture where you are not responsible for how you act because of your feelings. I mean, you see that all around us. If you're depressed, hey, it's okay that you lock yourself around in your house. What are you talking about? You can be depressed and still leave the house. You don't have to use it as an excuse to not live your life. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to say this in like but I mean, even think about anxiety. When you're so crippled by anxiety, you can't even get out and do things with people. Yes, you can. You can face it. You can do it afraid. You don't have to be in perfect spirits to get it done. That's kind of what I'm talking about. If you feel something, it's okay that you act. You're feeling moody or irritable? Hey, yell at people. Hit them, why not? Because you're not responsible. You got angry. No. Anger is an emotion, okay? And the Bible says, in your anger, don't allow it to turn into sin. Don't allow sin to come from your anger. So be angry, be happy, be whatever. But that feeling does not equate to an action. It's not the same thing. We can no longer justify ourselves in our culture with saying, but it's okay that I did this thing. It's okay that I, because there's injustice, because I'm angry, because whatever. No, nonsense. That is not how Christ showed us. And although our culture tries to tell us, especially the younger people, that you have to, if you really care about inequality, you really care about justice, so you have to go on these, these riots and all this nonsense, that's not how Christ would have dealt with it. Well, the time for talk is past. That's not what Jesus said. I'm pretty sure Jesus' way still works. Okay, our culture is trying to tell us it doesn't work. They're wrong. I'm going to believe the Messiah over, what CNN says or what Fox News says. I'm not bored, guys. So then that takes us to the last bit that is extremely confusing about this part. He says, work out your own salvation. Okay, all right. But then he says this that is so confusing. With fear and trembling. Now, what in the world does that mean? Aren't we told throughout the Bible, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Oh, by the way, work this out with fear and trembling. What does that mean? Does that mean that you as a Christian should go home, lock yourself in your closet, and weigh your heart, and then do it while you're scared? Well, we already looked at the way it doesn't mean to work out your salvation does not mean to lock yourself away. It means to let the salvation come out. Okay? But then the second part there is this fear and trembling bit. The idea is God is in this church's midst. Just like he's in our midst. And they need to have awe for him, but they don't have awe for him. They don't. What they are doing is they're getting together and fighting. So to work out your salvation with fear and trembling basically means don't take your salvation for granted. Don't do that. Rather, as you guys are letting your salvation come out, remember that you're letting it come out because God is with you. What we do does matter to God, and God does weigh us for that. So work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That would mean basically with him in mind. do things with him in mind. What does it mean to live in the fear of the Lord? It means to live in consideration of God's ways. It doesn't necessarily have to mean every time you go to church you're nervous. That's not what it has to mean. Rather, when you are living your life, you're living it in mind of Christ. I'm not going to cheat somebody on this deal. Why? Because I belong to Christ. That's living in the fear of the Lord. Even though nobody sees what I'm looking at my phone, I'm not going to look at something I shouldn't look at. Why? Because I'm living in the fear of the Lord. That's what it means to live in the fear of the Lord. So here he's talking about, hey, don't lock your salvation away. You've gotten saved, so let that salvation come out and get over this conflict. And remember that Christ is there. Christ is with you. And your conflicts, don't forget about God. Don't offend God. And you might say, okay, all right, so I followed everything you're saying so far mostly. But I still don't understand because it sounds like you're saying that we're saved by grace. That we're not saved by grace. So basically, although we have been saved, you need to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling because you need to earn your salvation. Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. Yes, we are saved by grace, and being saved means that we are required to obey. My kids are required to clean their room when I tell them, clean your room. Did you know that somebody else's kids are not required to come clean up my kid's room? Did you know that? Did you know, furthermore, I cannot go and tell somebody else's kid to go clean up their room unless the parents have, for whatever reason, given me that authority to do that. What am I getting at? See, we have been adopted in as heirs. So now that we are sons and daughters, we now have requirements of what we are expected to do. That doesn't mean that we earn our salvation. That means God, in his loving, absolute loving faithfulness, wants to make us more lovable. If you are married, are you happy with your wife working as a street worker and being dressed in shambles? No. You take care of her. You take her off the street. You don't want her to be, you want her to be taken care of. You want to provide for her, right? That's exactly what Christ is doing with us. He accepts us, he loves us, but he is making us more lovable. He's taking out all the ugly, all the sin, and putting in something else. That doesn't mean that he doesn't love us. That means that he's making us more lovable. See the difference? God accepts us. God loves us. We're saved by grace. Grace alone. That's it. Nothing we do. But God does have some requirements for his kids. When my kids come into my house, they are going to act differently than somebody else's kids coming into my house. Just the way it is. Think of it like this. Salvation is like an ongoing communication. I think that's a great way of saying this. So it's ongoing dialogue between you and the Father. It looks like this. He offers, we accept. He corrects, we repent. He directs, we obey. It's this ongoing thing. So yes, you have been saved, but you are being saved until the day. So we can reword this verse by saying something along the lines of this. Though I'm not there, this is Paul talking, though I'm not there, show the grace that you've received from God through reconciliation. We could reword it to say that, and that's basically hits the main points of verse 12. And we can go on to verse 13, which says, for it is God who is working in you both to will and to work according to his good purpose. So why should they work out their salvation in this conflict? Why shouldn't they just try to figure it out on their own and not take Christ into account? Because God is working in them. For this is why you should do this, it is God who is working in you. So hold on, I'm confused. You're saying I need to work out, or we all need to work out our salvation, but then also Christ is the one who's working. What does that, is it us or is it Christ? And I would say, yes. Yes, it is. If you remember chapter 1, verse 6, we looked at this before, I am sure that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion. That doesn't mean you are absolved from seeking. That means that you are not seeking on your own. You're not doing it on your own. As you are seeking God, God is also answering. He's doing a work as you are trusting him. As they are working, God is working in the situation. The work is not solo. You are not el solo lobo. You are part of God's body. So this basically means two things. First off, it means that you shouldn't exalt yourself over anybody else. Whether they're older or younger, whether they're richer or poorer, whatever, you shouldn't do that. Why should you not do that? Because it is God who's working in you both. But then the second thing is it means that you shouldn't be a fault finder, because God is the one working, right? Christians, by and large, don't need people, by and large, really don't need somebody following along behind them, nitpicking and finding faults with everything that they do. That's just something people don't really need. It's unhelpful and it just doesn't really work. When I was growing up, I grew up doing construction. My dad is very, very good with construction. We grew up doing construction, and so I worked with him for a number of years, but he very, very good. He used to build a lot of really expensive houses, and he was good at what he did. Well, living that life gave him some skills that I obviously lack. He can walk into a room, for instance, and you can be talking to him, and he already sees everything that they did wrong. That's not level. That's not even. That's not right. That door needs to be rehung. He just sees it. He sees it. Now, I'm not ragging on my dad. I'm not saying that he's this fault finder that goes around. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he worked construction for so long that he knows what he's doing. Well, in construction, there's these people, they're called inspectors. And everybody who works construction doesn't really get too well along with most inspectors. I mean, there's obviously the exception, like Jason probably gets along with everybody because it's Jason. But most everybody who works construction, inspectors are just kind of a pain. What they do is they go in and they look for something wrong. They are fault finders. That's what construction workers, they're there to build something. Carpenters, they build something. Inspectors don't build anything. They sit there and they nitpick. They fault find. That's their job. That's what they get paid for. Actually, our state is great about having all kinds of different restrictions that don't really make a whole lot of sense, but I guess it's a rant for another day. Anyways, these inspectors, that's their job. Well, unfortunately, sometimes what happens is people go to a church and they also think that their job is to be an inspector. You know what I mean? They need to say, this person's not doing a good job on that. This person needs to do that like this. This person needs to do this. This person isn't a good parent. This person isn't, doesn't have a good tight hold on their kids. This person... No. That's not what any Christian is called to do, and that's exactly the opposite of what this says. There's, hey, you guys need to work out your salvation, not, hey, you need to help somebody else mind their affairs. Hey, can you go stick your nose where it doesn't belong in somebody else's life? That's really not a good idea. It's going to cause more attention. It's probably going to work them to the point of discouragement. It's just not good. Think about it when it's with your kids. When you have kids, does it really help them that much when you point out every single fault that they have? Do you find that if you sit there like a rooster on its, what do they call it, perch, I guess, and you look down on them and say, well, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. Do you ever see your kids walk around thinking, man, I'm doing a good job. I should go do more? No, nobody works like that. No, rather, what does it do? It discourages them. It makes them think I did all this, and you didn't even recognize it. They get discouraged. There's a difference between somebody growing and somebody being discouraged. You can have a Christian that is literally still doing drugs, struggling in their walk, and they'll go to heaven. Meanwhile, you can have somebody who's been grown up in church, been in church their whole life, never done drugs a day in their life, and doesn't make it. It's not about necessarily having victory over every single struggle. It's about walking with the Father. It's about walking with the Lord. Do you think that all of you are going to get to heaven without any aches or bruises? You're going to perfect yourself on this side of heaven, and you're going to get to heaven, and you go, oh, look, I made it. I don't know about you, but I'm limping. I'm limping my way to heaven. As long as I get through the gates, that's all I need. Like, I can go there sick, I can go there tired, I can go there grieved, I can go there, but as long as I get to the door, we're all good, right? Just a little bit further. But if you go there and you think, oh, I'm pretty good, I deserve to go into that door, no, you don't. No, you don't. You missed the whole thing. You missed it. It's about grace. It's the difference between growing and being discouraged. Christians don't really need people to beat them over the head, especially when they're already beaten down. They don't need that. So it says here that God's working to give us two different things. Did I have it on the same thing? I do. Okay. So to do two different things. God who is working in you both to will and to work. to will and to work. So basically, God is working in us to give us the desire to do the right thing. That would be the will bit. And he's also working in us to give us the ability to do the right thing. That would be the work bit. So why does God need to work the desire in us? Well, once again, let's kind of apply this verse, take it from the screen and actually apply it to a situation. You're in a conflict. And what are the kind of things you say when you're in a conflict? I am so tired of this person. I don't want to talk to them anymore. Don't answer the phone, it might be them. Don't answer the door, say I'm not there. Just, no, I'm done. I don't want to be reconciled. I don't like them. They are an unpleasant person. They're a pain to deal with. In other words, God has to work a desire in you to actually be reconciled. He has to work a desire in you to actually do the work. How many of you think, man, I don't have anything else to do. I'd like to volunteer for a ministry. Well, if you're like me or anybody else in this room, you probably got a pretty full schedule. Well, I don't have anything better to do with my money, so I guess I'll just give it all to a missionary. Why not? I don't have anything better to do. Well, no, you probably do have something better to do. You probably, in your heart, do not have the desire to fully submit yourself 100% to the Lord. That is a very difficult thing to do. So what God does is he works the desire or the will to do his purposes. But then that's not all he does, because to desire to do a good thing is great, but it's not enough by itself. He also gives us the power or gives us the actual work bit, the ability, if you will. You might say, why do I need him to work in me the ability to work according to his good purpose? Why do I need that? Why do I need God to work in me the ability to work? I don't want that. Well, we live in a culture that says, I'm powerful, I can do this, I can overcome. But the truth is we can't. We get tired. We get tired. You ever been in conflict with somebody and it wears you down? You think, man, I'm over this. I want it to go away. We are limited. We get unfocused in life. So we need God not just to help us have the desire to do the right thing, but also to have the power to do the right thing. So good purposes here, and to work according to his good purposes. Good purposes is basically, God doesn't merely desire that we reach out to the world or to Roswell, but that we reach out to one another as a church. Also, that we reach out to our families. And I've said this about 1 billion times. I will continue to say it probably till the day I die. If you won't show Christ to your spouse, you can't show Christ to your neighbor. It's just not going to happen. It always starts in the family, starts in the home, and goes out. Always. What begins in the family reaches out to the community every time. So we can take all this and kind of just reword this, and I'll work back to the good purpose bit, but just hold on. Show your salvation to others as good as God works in you, so God's good purposes can be achieved. I think that's a good, rephrasing of everything that we looked at here. The showing your salvation would be the working out your salvation bit. When you are in ministry, when you're in conflicts, whatever, that you are allowing God to work. So good purposes, you could basically say it like this. God's good purposes is simply his ways. God's good purposes is simply his ways, which includes reconciliation, which includes the church getting along. God's good purposes only come through his strength as we obey. Let's read through this again. Therefore, my dear friends, just as you have always obeyed, remember this is a church that is not getting along, so now, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. This isn't the way a church ought to act. For it is God who is working in you both to will and to work according to his good purposes. He's working in all of you, okay? He's working in all of you, the desire to do it and actual ability to do it. So you need to make sure that you're working out your salvation with fear and trembling. And again, that verse, which I have no idea why it's there. Sorry about that. And I want to close out with a story. There was a pastor, a Louisiana pastor. You might know who he is. You might have never heard of him. His name's Jesse Duplantis. Have you guys ever heard of Jesse Duplantis? No, he's like a televangelist. Nah. Okay. Well, this Louisiana pastor, Jesse Duplantis, he was telling this story about how he went to buy a car from this sales lot, And he's in there working over the deal. And the guy's not really giving him something that he likes. He doesn't really like the deal that's going on. He's like, okay, this guy, he's trying to take advantage of it. So he gets a little bit upset. And so, in his pastorly smartness, he pins this salesman up against the wall. And this is a true story. And he's the one that told the story, so it's not like, okay, all right. And, he's getting all angry. He's yelling at him. He's, holding him. And the salesman's all, ah! And meanwhile, his wife is all, I think it's his wife, is all, now, Jesse, that's not how we're doing things. People talk in Louisiana. Now, Jesse, we're not doing that now. And and so he lets him down eventually and calms him down. And eventually he goes back and says, hey, I'm sorry I acted like that. I'm a pastor. I shouldn't be acting like that, But what I'm getting at here is, Jesse Duplantis, before he was a pastor, was a Christian, and before he was a Christian, he was a heathen. And sometimes what happens in the course of our walk is we don't let the salvation come out, we let the heathen come out. You know what I'm saying? We deal with things maybe not in the most tactful way, maybe not as though we are actually showing the light of Christ, but as though we're kind of just tired with people's nonsense. And this verse is reminding us, no, let your salvation come out. Because Christ is in your midst, and he's still working in you, right? He's still doing a work. Let God do that work. Please join me in prayer. As we go to prayer, I just want this to be a devotion moment for you. This is between you and God, not between anybody else. The basic idea here is your salvation coming out, or is the heathen coming out? Whatever conflict you find yourself in today, is the Christian coming out, or is the heathen coming out?